Imagine sitting in the chair of the college admissions officer, seeing exactly what they see in the exact order they see it, as they decide whether to accept a student or not. Most people never get to peek behind that curtain, yet this process affects millions of students every single year. Hey there, parents, families, and students. My name is Andrew Hoffman. Welcome back to my channel. I'm a former director of admissions at Swarthmore College and former admissions officer at Vanderbilt, and I've read tens of thousands of college applications over my 2 decades in college admissions. Today, I want to take you inside the actual digital reading environment that most admission officers use every single day. What they look at first, how long they spend on each section, what kind of notes they take, and how those notes relate to the committee conversations later on. While the examples you'll see here aren't real student data, and it's not the real software, I've developed a mock-up that most admission offices use called Slate Reader. The interface, workflow, and decision-making process is very similar across highly selective institutions. And if you want an extra pair of eyes on your application before submitting it, sign up for my application review service. I'll go line by line through your application and provide feedback, advice, and edits before submitting it to your #1 college. Just click the link below to get started. Now let's step into the reader seat and walk through an application the way admission professionals actually do it. So here we are on the main screen that admission officers see when logging into their Slate Reader account. Just a note before we begin, this is just one reader that admission officers use. There are several others, but this is the most popular method by far. When I started at admissions in 2009, we were reading paper files and lugging massive tubs of files home with us, handwriting notes, comments, and ratings, and obviously that era is long gone, and now everything is digitized, of course. The reader is one part of Slate, the admissions CRM or database that holds all the admissions information, such as tens of thousands of files or even maybe hundreds of thousands of student records, high school records, college access organizations, community colleges, and other contacts. All of the information from applications, for example, is mapped into the database. So I'm only showing you a part of this today. Finally, as you can probably see, this is simply a mock-up. There are a lot of videos on YouTube of admission officers presenting Slate Reader to their colleagues in webinar formats, which is where I could retrieve the exact colors used. So while the actual look and feel can be found elsewhere online, you're getting a rare look at exactly how admission officers might read a file. On the left-hand side, you can see a navigation panel. We won't get into all of that today. We're gonna focus most on the Browse navigation panel. The Browse menu shows all of the various bins available to the admissions officer. So this might look different from school to school. For example, if you have a decentralized admissions process, you might see school and college bin structures instead of the entire pool here. Let's go over some of these bins. First, we have awaiting materials. That's where files go when they're not yet officially complete. Each college makes up its own rules on what complete means. Sometimes complete is when just a common application and transcript are present. Other times you need every required material to move on to the next step. The small number you see on the bottom right-hand corner is the number of files in that bin. So for this fictitious college, we have 698 files in the awaiting materials bin. There are rules that run behind the scenes when files complete. For example, if a file had a Common App, teacher rec, testing report, and application fee, it's probably going to be staying in the awaiting materials bin. Once the counselor uploads the school report and transcript, it might automatically complete and then move on to the complete bin. If you start adding up all of the small numbers on the screen, you're going to arrive at about 50,000 or so files. So this fictitious example is a screen you might see in, say, mid-January. A bunch of files have already been reviewed through early decision, and now the office is focused on regular decision. While I'll go over a lot of this, if you have questions, please drop them below and I'll try to answer as many as I can. The first column is what we call holding bins. They're holding all of the files, complete and incomplete, before they're read by an admissions officer. The second column is where the file will go after the initial read. Sometimes we call this the first read. That is typically completed by an admissions officer, but it's sometimes completed by an outside external reader. There are seasonal readers that often read a subset of files. Sometimes less academically competitive files. Again, it depends on the institution and process. We have recommend admit, recommend waitlist, which is typically only used for regular decision files, recommend deny, second review, which is for files that either might need a second pair of eyes on them before deciding what to do with the file, whether that's a recommendation or final committee, or perhaps the file is technically complete but missing a critical piece of information. Maybe the transcript is submitted, for example, but it only has partial grades, so the file is sent to second review. Final committee and the International Final Committee. This is a fictitious example, so colleges might have more bins. For example, they might have a merit scholarship bin for the most competitive files, or maybe there's a recruited athletics bin. Maybe there aren't any recommended bins and everything either goes to final committee or deny. It really depends on the institution. And then we have the bins in the third column. This is where files go after the final decision has been made. So in this example, perhaps admission officers can route clearly admissible and competitive files to the recommended admit bin, because they know the applicant doesn't need a committee presentation, review, or vote. Maybe the office has come up with very firm guidelines about this, especially if it's a very selective institution. It's possible that the director, dean, or other senior leader then reviews all of the files in the recommended admit bin at some point and move them appropriately. Perhaps many or most go onto the admit bin in the third column, with some going to the waitlist or even the deny bin. So here you can see we have admit, waitlist, deny, defer. This is for early decision or maybe early action files that are being deferred from the early round to regular decision. This bin of 243 files will be read again and then probably rerouted when a final decision has been made. Withdraw bin, this is for students who submitted an application but decided to withdraw. Perhaps for personal reasons, or they don't think it's the right fit any longer, or they get admitted early decision elsewhere. If we're in mid-January, you can see 347 students have withdrawn, which means they were probably admitted in ED1 and withdrew. Just a note here, colleges typically count these as an application, so when you see an admit rate, the denominator includes these withdrawn applications, even though they might not have been reviewed and certainly not admitted. Finally, we have an incomplete bin. That's usually 0 until the very end because all of the files in the awaiting materials bin that don't eventually complete will end up in the incomplete bin. At Swarthmore, for example, all of the files that were deemed incomplete at the end of the season were removed from the denominator, so we didn't count them as an application since we couldn't render a decision. Now let's dive into the complete bin and see what it might look like. You may have noticed on the previous screen that we have 12,908 applications in the complete bin. Those are ready for admissions officers to read. Then you'll notice the columns here. We have Common App ID, Name, Major 1, and Major 2. This is a customizable screen, so admission officers could also see high school, state, country listed, among other fields. On the right, you see a small icon that looks like a piece of paper. That's where you can open up the entire application and begin reading. Now you see the button on the top called Add to Queue. This is where an admissions officer would select students they want to read and add them to the reading queue for that day. What you don't see here is some filtering functionality. I didn't think it was necessary to show on the screen, but I can explain it. Basically, admission officers can choose who they want or need to read that day. For example, if my territory includes Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas, and I just want to read my files from Oklahoma, I can filter this list of nearly 13,000 so it just shows my Oklahoma files. Then I would go in and choose the files based on how many files I needed to read that day. You can filter on almost anything, so there might be a push to read all scholarship files by a certain date or international files. Let's say I want to read Lindsay Boss's file. I would click her name and then add her to my queue. I can then click on the queue on the left-hand side and start reading files. So here's Lindsay's file. We'll spend quite a bit of time on this screen. Again, this is a mock-up. Does every college have all of these fields listed? No, of course not. But do most colleges have a screen called Dashboard to see the immediate information? Yeah, probably. So I took what I know about selected college admissions and added some information here so you can see what an admission officer typically sees first. Before we jump into the dashboard, let's talk about the left-hand side. These are tabs for each section of the application. While we won't see every single tab today, I don't want this video to be over an hour long, we'll go through many of them. Here we have Dashboard, which is the screen you see here on the right. School Group, we'll get to this, but it's a few reports based on applicants from the given school over the years. Biographical, this is the Common App, or at least part of it. Colleges can easily customize this panel, by the way. So instead of one biographical tab, you might see the Common App split into multiple tabs, like demographics, activities, writing, supplement, etc. School Report, which is the form submitted by the counselor and typically the narrative letter of recommendation. School Profile, this is optional, but a lot of schools also submit a PDF profile that explains more about their school. Transcripts, of course, this is the high school transcript, but if a student is also enrolled in community college through dual enrollment, you'll see that here. Or maybe you're an international student and you have your leaving examination certificate, that would also be listed here. Teacher recommendations, testing, again, if the student chooses test optional, maybe this just displays AP and IB testing. Interview, this is where the interview report would be listed. And then finally, athletics, arts portfolio, and documents. We'll talk about those a bit later. Turning back to the dashboard, first you'll see Lindsay's name at the top as well as her ID number. Next, you'll see some biographic information listed. This is all taken from the Common App or other application platform and brought into the file. So this will have her name, home address, sex, maybe gender identity. You'll see birth date, and maybe some other information. Here you can see Lindsay's citizenship and citizenship country or countries. If you're an international family or student watching, you'd see other countries and citizenship types listed to alert the admissions officer how they should read the file. You could also have mailing address, maybe you attend a boarding school, for example, or other status or fields. On top, you'll also see which round Lindsay has chosen. In this example, she has chosen Early Decision 1 for Fall 2026 entry term. Now we'll move on to the school information. You can see the SEEB code, which is the unique code given to high schools, and the fact that she attends Arlington Central High School in Arlington, Texas. It's a public school, and you'll see that on the right side. Then we can see some school demographics. Here we see the percentage of students attending 2-year schools and 4-year schools, whether the high school is a Title I school, what percentage of students are receiving free or reduced price lunch, which is an indicator of poverty and resources at the school, and then GPA and rank in class. Some of this information is self-reported by the school counselor, and others come from national databases or other data sources. The GPA and class rank in particular are taken from the school report that is submitted by the school counselor. Some of these fields might be blank. For example, if Arlington Central doesn't officially rank students, that field might be blank on the dashboard. Then we get to a box that I simply made up, but it's an example of institution-specific information. Colleges often use codes in the way they present information, just in case information is leaked or seen by the wrong people. If they use codes, the casual observer might not know what they mean. Here we have a box for demonstrated interest. Again, this is made up, but you might see these types of codes. HSV-25, meaning Lindsay attended a high school visit in the fall of 25. HSV-24, maybe she did the same thing when she was a junior. ISCV might be information session and campus visit. CF means she attended a college fair and completed an inquiry form. VP might mean virtual program. Perhaps the college held a student panel, and since Lindsay registered, her participation is tracked here. I might mean she interviewed. CT, maybe that's click-through, meaning she opened at least one email and clicked on a link. OH means she attended an open house. And AW, maybe that's the name of their athletic clinic on campus. To the right, you can see O, C, and AT. That might stand for open, click, and average time. So maybe she opened 47 emails from the admissions office, clicked on 14 links, and spent on average less than a minute on web pages after clicking on the links. Finally, you see a rating up above. Maybe that's an algorithmic rating of 8 out of 10 points for all the interest she's shown. If you're curious about demonstrated interest, I also did a video all about that subject, and I'll link that below. On the bottom of this box, you see the word groups with a bunch of codes and green check marks next to a few. This could literally be anything. M might stand for their honors program. L might stand for legacy. BU might stand for business scholar. Maybe Lindsay applied for a specific scholarship. Basically, what you need to know here is that admission officers are digesting information very quickly and sometimes use codes to guide their initial take on the file, even before opening it up. Next is the major box on the top right. You can see Lindsay is applying for business and economics, and both of those happen to be in the School of Arts and Science. Then you can see the admissions officer information. Since she's assigned to me, you might see my institutional screen name there and her geomarket. The College Board divides the country and the world up into geomarkets, smaller parts of states and sometimes countries where admission officers can focus resources and recruitment. Geomarkets don't mean much to the general public, but they're a way to divide regions further than political and geographic lines. Arlington falls into Texas 21, so that's Lindsay's geomarket. Then we see testing. Now, if the college is test optional and Lindsay chose test optional admissions, this box should be blank. Let's assume testing is either required or Lindsay wants her testing considered. Here we have the SAT Super Score with a 700 in evidence-based writing and reading and a 670 in math. For the ACT, you might see a composite of 33 and a math section of 32. Why are you not seeing the other sections? Well, sometimes the other sections aren't as important to the admissions office. Or maybe there's a second page all about testing that you're not seeing in this example. Again, it just depends on the college. The final box on this page is for the arts supplement. Perhaps this college accepts arts portfolios and they are rated. You might see an R for round and then a bunch more codes. Maybe V is for vocal performance, I is for instrumental performance, S is for spoken word, D is for dance, A is for visual arts, and C is for creative writing. It looks like the faculty rated Lindsay an A+ in instrumental performance and a C in dance. Does that make a difference? Sometimes. Maybe Lindsay plays the tuba and their main tuba player is graduating this year. That might make a difference in holistic review. Finally, you see the big, bright red codes on top. Slate Reader allows admission offices to choose what to display on top, and again, they can be anything that's important to the office. These red tags will be displayed on every single page of the file review to always remind the reader of important information. In this example, you can see that Lindsay has a legacy tag, a VIP tag, and an RA tag, which stands for recruited athlete. Because this isn't my first video discussing these institutional priorities, I know what the comments might say. Viewers are going to think that this is unfair, not right, ridiculous that admission officers could consider this information an application review, but it's reality. I'm not here to agree or disagree with the practice, but to give you the real, honest information. I do have my personal views on this, believe me. Does this type of information always mean that Lindsay or someone like Lindsay would be admitted? No, not necessarily, but it could play a role. You could easily see other tags up here. Maybe the college is elevating engineers because they have a new major, so engine is written here. Or they want to know those students who participated in their open house. This is just an example. Next, you'll find the school group tab. This is an internal report that the admissions office automatically compiles to look at two main pieces of information: this year's applicant pool at the high school and last year's applicant pool. Could it include more history? Absolutely, but it's typical that these two reports are here at minimum. You can see here that we are looking at this year's school grouping report for students who wish to enter in the fall of 2026. That's this year's applicant pool. On top, you can see the column headings. Here we have the bin where the file currently is, name of the student, Major 1 selection, GPA, application round, more codes, and final decision. You'll notice that this is not in alphabetical order, rather it's ordered by GPA. This could easily be ordered by rank and class as well, but those are probably the most popular ways to order this list. You can see our applicant Lindsay listed here. As we know, she's in the complete bin currently. She wants to major in business, she has a 4.24 GPA, she's applying early decision 1, presumably these codes means that she's a legacy VIP and recruited athlete, and she doesn't have a final decision yet because her application hasn't been read. You can see some other students listed here as well. Zeus Perry has already been slated to be admitted in regular decision, and he has a lower GPA than Lindsay. He also has an R code, so it's possible he's a recruited athlete and has already been admitted by the committee. Garth Garrett is another ED1 applicant from Arlington Central and will likely be read on the same day as Lindsay since his application is also complete. Then we go to the next screen in this tab, and that's the fall 2025 school grouping. This is last year's applicant pool. It has the same information, but these are final decisions. The bin might be frozen in time when they remove the data from last year to make way for this year's applicant pool. Let's take a look at these two students, Melody Kim and Mary Jones. You might notice that I selected these two students because Lindsay's GPA falls in between them both. While it's not the end-all be-all of the final decision, their decisions will likely be taken into consideration when reading Lindsay's file. We can see that Melody also applied ED1, was admitted and deposited, meaning she's a first year on campus this year. Mary, on the other hand, applied regular decision, was waitlisted, and withdrew her application, likely because she was admitted and chose to attend elsewhere. You can also see that Rebecca Borso on the top of the school group was denied. There might be many reasons for this, but one reason might be because she has an international code. A lot of institutions are need-aware for international students, so if Rebecca applied for need-based financial aid, despite having top academics at Arlington Central, she was still denied. I'm obviously making this up as this isn't a real student, but it could be a real reason. Or maybe it had nothing to do with financial aid and she just didn't make it through holistic review. And then we can see Patrick Jones. Patrick was admitted in regular decision, but also has a withdraw final decision, because he chose to attend another college despite being admitted. If he withdrew before the decision was made, he probably wouldn't be in the admit bin. And then we have Harriet Bruce. Harriet was waitlisted, and she has waitlist no response listed on her final decision. That means when the college offered her a spot on the waitlist, she simply didn't accept or respond. Students who don't respond typically don't have the best chance on the waitlist. So pro tip, if you're waitlisted and you want to be considered, be sure to respond to elevate your chances. Now let's move on to the next screen, the biographical tab. Remember, in this fake example, this is the entire Common App. It would normally start on the first page of the Common App, but I'm not going to go through each page in this video or we'd be here for days. So this is just an example of seeing an activity list. You can also see the other pages that are sort of grayed out here. Admission officers can easily go through the Common App pages left and right through a click on their keyboard. So if they went to the right, they'd see the personal statement and additional information. Next is the school report. Again, these are just examples. I uploaded a blank PDF here so you can see what a Common App school report page 1 looks like and what questions are asked of counselors, but you can easily Google this as well and find the entire PDF. The second page is where you'd find the narrative letter of recommendation from the counselor. So typically admission officers would go through the dashboard, then school grouping reports, then the entire Common App, including demographics, activities, honors and awards, essays, additional information, and supplemental questions before getting to the school report and counselor letter recommendation. So just think about that ordering as you put together your entire application. Next is a school profile. I pulled this fictitious school profile from another activity I've done in the past, but this is typically what admission officers would see. It might be a page, or 2, or 4, it just depends on the high school. And sometimes there isn't a profile included, and that's okay. Admission officers know this is optional, and it has nothing to do with the student's decision. Next is the high school transcript. Again, this can be multiple pages, but this example is just 1 page. Note that admission officers can also make everything bigger and zoom in case they can't read fine print on the screen. Admission officers are going to spend some time on the screen since every transcript looks different. In Florida public schools, for example, transcripts can sometimes be 15 pages long. But because admission officers represent students by geographic territory, the Florida rep knows this and can get through 15 pages in very little time because they know where to look. Next is testing. This is a page that would be seen for a test optional student. It's just listing one AP exam that has already been taken as well as another that will be taken. If a student wants their test scores considered or it's required, you'd likely see the SAT and ACT scores listed here. And then we get to the interview report. Now that said, not every college offers interviews, and even if a college offers interviews, it's safe to say that some of those colleges don't require an interview report. But if they did, it would end up in a tab like this. On this report, you'd likely see some information related to the interviewer as well as the applicant, and maybe a rating or a series of ratings. You'd also probably see some comments. I've seen interview reports go on for 3 pages, so this is a shorter example, but this would be taken into account at colleges that practice holistic review, if it's present. Finally, the last 3 tabs in this fictitious example. We have athletics, which would show up for recruited athletics if there's athletic documentation in the file. This might be a pre-read form or a short application submitted in the summer. It might be an earlier transcript or a separate essay or essays. It could be anything, depending on the college, but it could show up here. Arts portfolio. This might be a write-up from the faculty about the student submission. You remember in Lindsay's dashboard, it said the faculty gave her an A+ in instrumental submission and a C in the dance submission. Those could easily be numbers, by the way. There's no standard process or practice for this. But this is the tab where an admission officer might see additional information and comments listed. And finally, a general documents tab. Maybe the college offers a spot in their applicant portal where students can upload a resume or additional documents. Or it might be a series of emails from the applicant to the office that can also show up here in Slate Reader. And then there are other tabs that could easily be here, such as a fly-in application, or maybe a student submits both the QuestBridge application and a Common App, and an admissions officer might have a tab for that here. Finally, we get to what we call the reader review form or reader rating form. This is a pop-up box that's always available to the reader, and in my experience, this could be completed while the file is being read or at the very end. Again, it depends on the college's process. Here's a fictitious example, but it's probably similar to what a lot of selective colleges use in some way. First, we have the top box. This simply says the reader's initials so the office can track reads each day and knows who completed the form. Then we have some type of academic rating or ratings. Virtually all colleges give some type of academic rating in college admissions, but everyone uses a different rubric, scale, etc. In this fake example, we have 2 ratings. One academic, which might include a combination of testing, GPA, rank in class, rigor of the curriculum, and possibly the strength of the high school. And then there's a C code. Maybe this stands for curiosity, and again, the reader could follow a rubric to assign this number. Then we have an involvement or activity section. This might include ratings for honors and awards, or maybe writing as well. In this example, we have 2 ratings, an L and an S. Maybe the L stands for leadership, where Lindsay gets a 3+. You don't know the context here though, so is it on a 5.0 scale? Is a 1 the highest, or is 5 the highest? Then the S might stand for sustained involvement. Maybe this college elevates students and prioritizes students who are doing things consistently over time, and they want to rate students in that way. Then we might have a major fit rating, or maybe it's a school fit rating for those universities with multiple colleges and schools. Again, a rubric of some sort would be used to get to this rating. Next is a box for short comments. I'll say that this evolved over my time in admissions. When I first began at admissions, we were expected to write full sentences and sometimes paragraphs after our initial read, but that morphed into short sentences and more coded language to get through the files more quickly. Here we have, near top of SG based on last year. That's near top of school group. Below profile testing, okay for ED, which means her SAT and or ACT are below the school's average, but maybe there are several potential admits in early decision that are below the overall testing profile once you include the regular decision students, and that's okay for the institution. OR major might mean overrepresented major. Maybe business is very popular and the reader wants the committee to remember that. Plus ITVW might signal that the interview report and experience was overall positive. No athletic push depends on the pool and CMTE, which is committee. Lindsay might not be getting official preference from the athletics department, so she's being reviewed against all other applications in early decision. The reader here is just signaling to the committee that the decision will depend on who she's up against at the full committee. Finally, we have an overall rating, the O, and the next bin, which is final committee. R might stand for recommendation. So in this example, we're going to send Lindsay on to the final committee for another review. Will she absolutely be heard in final committee? Maybe, maybe not. Perhaps there are a lot of students with similar ratings, and the office leadership says they can't take that many students onto committee. So they say only students with a 1 or 2 academic rating will be heard in committee. Since Lindsay has a 3 academic rating, maybe she gets deferred after that first read. Or maybe the admissions officer feels strongly and will advocate for her to the dean outside of committee. Literally anything is possible in college admissions, and like I always say, it depends on the college. And that's the real workflow. The screens, the sequence, the quick judgments, and the tiny details that can make all the difference in the admissions committee room. If you liked this video, and I really hope that you did, please go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with a friend who might be stressed out about college admissions right now. And if this gave you a clearer picture of what happens behind the scenes, go ahead and check out my other video about how admissions decisions are made. You can check that out right here. I'll see you in the next video.